Hi, this is Sara Russell, and today I wanted to share with you the LabSmarts report for a sample client. This is a 40-year-old man who came to me for a one-time um, consultation on his routine blood work run by his physician. His main health concerns was that he was significantly underweight and also reported a very low appetite, anxiety, and poor sleep. So we're going to take a look at what the LabSmart software shows us and how the insights um, on the subtle patterns might help you catch something that you could easily miss without the software. So you can see on the red blood cell analysis page that his red blood cell size is large. He has macrocytic red blood cells, which is not uncommon in somebody who is underweight and under eating. If you were eating normally, and were underweight, I would approach the case differently from somebody who's reporting having a very low appetite, taking in lower than normal amounts of food, and with a pattern like this. If somebody were eating normally and underweight with large red blood cells, I would definitely want to figure out if they have some severe malabsorption issue caused by something like celiac disease, IBD, parasitic infection, etc. But if we already know the person is struggling with a very low appetite and not taking in enough calories, the first thing that you think about is, okay, he has insufficient nutrient levels because he doesn't have much of an appetite and is under eating. So certainly we see here under the possible root causes, B12 and folate insufficiency, vitamin C insufficiency, thyroid hormone insufficiency as a possibility. And then we see this very interesting flag for chronic alcohol consumption, which might not be the most obvious thing that you would think about when you're looking at somebody's red blood cell parameters. Um, because he had not reported any medication or substance use to me, except for the occasional sleep aid, he said that he went through periods when his sleep was particularly bad, and his doctor would prescribe trazodone for periods of time. Um, I was very curious about the chronic alcohol consumption flag because it's not something that I usually see on on these reports. It might have actually been the first or only time that I saw it. Um, so here's his red blood cell analysis. Again, when you're looking at these markers individually and as a whole, the first thing that you want to make sure is that the person is not experiencing suboptimal oxygen delivery to the blood um, in terms of, possible iron deficiency anemia, which would typically show with small red blood cells or with B12 and or folate deficiency anemia that presents typically with large red blood cells. Uh, but when you see additional flags based on specific patterns that the software is picking up on, those are real time savers because who knows how much research I would have had to do, how many hours I would have had to pour through papers to come up with the understanding that this individual might be a chronic alcohol user. Um, so let's look really quick at his white blood cell pattern. We see um, we see that there is possible acute immune activity and elevated monocytes. So let's take a quick look at this, even though this is not our primary concern here. Um, he has somewhat elevated white blood cell count, um, very high monocytes, both from a relative perspective in terms of the percentage, but also in terms of the absolute monocytes. These are very, very high. I don't think I've ever seen monocytes that high. Um, so there may be, a pattern of immune imbalance to explore in this individual. He did report some issues with candida, overgrowth of the skin, uh, possibly related to his nutrition patterns. He did tell me uh, that one of his main sources of nutrition was carbonated beverages that were sweetened with sugar because he was struggling to get enough calories and energy in through food because of his low appetite. So I would say that that would be the first thing, that somebody um, could fix in a situation like that. So very high reliance on simple sugars, potentially causing some immune and inflammatory disruption. And we can imagine, at the gut level, in addition to the skin, very likely, possibly some overgrowth of candida in the gut and internally, in addition to just on the skin, looking at a pattern like that. Okay, so um, his uh, um, his fasting blood sugar was not measured by his doctor um, for some reason, but his triglycerides are below optimal, which is consistent with somebody who's under eating and has very low body fat. His kidney analysis is very, very good. It's quite optimal. So let's look at the liver and biliary analysis, which is obviously naturally if somebody's LabSmarts report flags for possible chronic alcohol use, you definitely want to make sure that their liver enzymes are um, as in range as possible. His AST and ALT are not particularly disastrous. So this is very interesting. So when I did talk to him, I said, look, I'm just very curious about, whether you have a history of current or recent past use of alcohol, because you did have a pattern that came up on your red blood cells report that made me curious about that. And he said, "Oh yes, I didn't think it was relevant, but I do have a history of heavy drinking." So I was like, "Oh, okay, that changes the picture. So thank you, for sharing that information." Um, if I had just done this manually, I may have missed it, because you can see, the ALT is only a little bit above optimal. Certainly, from a medical perspective, this was not in any way flagged on his lab report. So his doctor told him everything's fine. Um, in terms of, his liver and his kidneys, and said, "Oh yeah, you just have like a couple things off in your red and white blood cell stuff, but just try to improve your diet and you'll be fine," which is not an unusual medical perspective, right? But here, even though the ALT and I'm sorry, even though the ALT and GGT are kind of, borderline, just barely above optimal, um, and the AST is optimal, um, th this this tells us less about the person's issues with alcohol use uh, than their red blood cell analysis patterns as interpreted by LabSmarts. So let's look at his lipids analysis. This is just a repeat of what we saw in the glucose um, analysis, low triglycerides. And then GGT is also an oxidative stress marker. So we see that again there. And that is that is the end of his report. So this is such an interesting case, just to help you understand the potential of LabSmarts to help fill in some gaps. Showing you something that might not be really obvious, especially in cases where a client or patient may not be telling you the full story, which does sometimes happen, um, for whatever reason. So when you look at the lab work with the nuanced report that LabSmarts provides you, you not only save time, but you can pick up on patterns that could be very, very easily missed without the software.